back again. It seems you all are just as excited as I am to hear today's spooky tale. Today, we have a special treat. While cruising around over on Reddit a few months ago, I got in touch with ebook author Robert Leakey, who has so generously provided the material for this video. His work, Unnerving Tales from an Anthropologist, chronicles the bizarre adventures of a man as he tries to uncover man's mysterious passage through time. So, it's time to settle in for the night. Lock your doors and windows, pull down those shades, and tug up those blankets. For now, it's time for a bedtime story. An Archaeological Survey from Unnerving Tales from an Anthropologist. Written by Robert Leakey and told you by yours truly, the Watcher Rezz'd. One of the odd aspects of being an anthropology professor is getting called from time to time to do an archaeological survey. It is the academic version of looking for buried power lines and sewer pipes before digging. If a construction company wants to rip up some untouched land and build a new strip mall or factory or housing development, they need to be sure that they are not going to bulldoze one of humanity's earliest settlements or grind up the skeleton of the earliest bipedal human being. It is this practice that keeps houses from being built on ancient Native American burial grounds in real life and keeps children from getting sucked into television sets. Most of the time, they turn up nothing but a few arrowheads, and possibly a millstone, and construction moves forward with a clear conscience. Though there are times they turn up something exponentially cool that we never would have found on our own because universities do not fund digs without a clear target. It is a wonderful way to trick industry into footing the bill for academia. One of the other history nerds that I have an email chain with was conscripted for a survey near his university to clear a site for a gas station in nowhere middle America. It turns out, way back in the day, long before the Clovis invasion, the site of this random gas station was a watering hole with particularly unstable banks. He and his team of conscripted grad students uncovered a massive grave filled with skeletons of adolescent male mammoths. Mammoths lived in male-dominated packs. When a younger male in the pack grew up and looked like it might be a challenge to the leader there would be a scuffle, and the young male would be sent out on its own to search for a new life, which led to a network of adolescent male mammoths wandering the continent alone. This ancient watering hole apparently looked very inviting to those impressionable mammoths just thrown out on their own. They would go up for a drink, the bank would give out, and they would have no one from their pack around to help pull them out. Mass death obviously is always tragic, but academics have a way of detaching themselves from tragedy, and from the mass graves he pulled fully intact skeletons and advanced our understanding by decades, to say the least. My friend got enough material to continue his career for another decade, and the gas station got the fuck off a few miles down the road. But that is what archaeology is. It is sifting through some of the most tragic and frightening points in history to try to put together an idea of a normal day a couple thousand years ago. Throughout my career, I have been given the opportunity to go on a few of these kinds of digs myself. When you spend a good portion of your career begging the university to fund your research, it is nice to have someone seek you out and offer you money to dig in a virtually random location. And with publish or perish being muttered all over your tenure meetings, it is nice to get literally any material to write about. Anyway, on to my most interesting archaeological survey. I got the opportunity to go on a dig on the East Coast to clear a plot of land before someone built a monstrous hunting cabin full of concrete and glass panes and lots of stuff that I am not qualified to judge since I am not an architect. But it was not to my taste. It was out in some lovely, almost untouched swath of old-growth wilderness that almost makes you forget about civilization for a moment. And I got to lead a team out into that wilderness to bore a hole directly through that peaceful scene before a construction crew came smashing through. Or they would have, if we had not found anything. Since we were working on someone else's budget, we started off our examination with a round of ground-penetrating radar through half the valley. From that, we located a limestone cave filled in with dirt and possibly some remains. When we were finally able to dig our way into the cavern, we spent a month carefully digging out a strange collection of ancient megafauna. Our best guess as to why they were all immortalized in the cave is an ancient storm and some heavy rain caused a mudslide which filled in the cave. All the animals in the cave at the time were frozen in the mud and preserved forever. That satisfied the question of how we found a cavern full of corpses, but not the question of why there were so many different prey and predator animals all together in the cavern. As a quick aside here, megafauna was not rare in the ancient world. Humans grew up in Africa alongside modern African megafauna, like elephants, lions, and the like, and that is why they knew to either kill us or stay the hell away from us. Or at least, that is my theory on why we can still find megafauna here. The megafauna that evolved in the rest of the world had no idea what was coming for it when we started our journey out of Africa, through the Middle East, up to Siberia, and over the bridge to Canada, killing and eating all the bewildered giant animals in our path. And when the giant sloth saw a tiny, shivering pink biped with no claws or teeth, it did not give it a second thought. For long. There still is some small evidence of their existence in American ecology, the avocado being my favorite. Lots of fruiting plants rely on animals eating them, and then, pass their seeds after digestion to start an offshoot of the plant in a new location. The avocado seed is so large that it needs an elephant-sized digestive tract to pass through it in one piece. So the avocado seed is one of those odd remaining relics of when enormous animals walked the planet before we came along and ate them all. But back to the story. The good old archaeological explanation for finding multiple bodies stashed away in some crevice is predation. Modern-day jaguars will pull prey in the trees and hide it from scavengers, and many ancient predators were no different. In fact, some of the oldest known human remains were found stashed in some hole after they were hunted down and eaten, before we had worked our way up the food chain. For a while we worked to uncover the remains. I was tossing the theory back and forth with my grad students that we discovered the den of some ancient super predator which haunted the American megafauna and was powerful enough to drag their enormous bodies back to its cave. We envisioned some monstrous, furry beast standing higher than a house, charging after packs of mastodons and pulling apart dire wolves. We would swap stories about the mammoth hunter surviving in some subterranean cavern, just waiting to burst out to the surface and terrorize New York. Sadly, there was no evidence of our monster, and our campfire stories faded out. It was not just the lack of evidence in the valley we were studying, but there was no evidence of our hypothetical mammoth-munching monster having ever been found. It would have needed to be huge to hunt and move the prey we had found, and the home range it would have needed to support such a large biomass would have been vast. There is no way it was only localized to our one little East Coast valley. So, we began discussing the possibility of some predatory pack. We thought we could have discovered some sort of ancient wolf den, and the animals were dragged or herded back by a group of mid-sized animals rather than one enormous predator. However, those stashed bodies usually show signs of being mauled or bitten, broken bones, teeth marks, the like. The remains we pulled out of the cavern showed none of that. Aside from that, the pack theory did not explain the volume of animals we found. Hunting large animals was dangerous, and a single mastodon would have been more than enough to comfortably feed a pack. Filling the cave would have been a dangerous and wasteful task for pack hunters. Even ignoring all of that, we could not properly explain the presence of multiple predators. They would not have hunted together, and they likely would not have hunted each other when there were other more vulnerable, more calorie-rich animals about. The remains were too varied to be all prey from one specific predator group. Whatever had collected all these animals in the cavern was not discriminating. A saber-tooth, dire wolves, mastodons, an American cheetah, a giant beaver, 2 giant sloths. The collection made absolutely no sense as a pack or as prey. It was like a who's who of what got killed off by encroaching human hunters. As far as we can tell, they had not been mauled or attacked at all. They were all sitting happily together in a cave for no reason. The last thing we discovered in the cavern added a whole slew of other questions rather than solving anything. Chitin, that weird hard substance that makes up insect shells and exoskeletons, fossilizes fairly well. You may commonly look down onto the pavement in seaside towns and see the ancient fossil of a trilobite. As a child, I was always fascinated to find these ancient crustaceans stuck in the sidewalk, and I thought it was just odd they had not been pulled out from museums. And as an adult, I was sad to learn that they are just so common that there is no reason not to use it in the sidewalk, and my rock collection was useless. Chitin hangs together much more readily after deterioration of soft tissue than a skeleton, and easily keeps the shape of animals after soft tissue breakdown. We might have to dig out the bones of a mammal and hope that one died in stable enough way that we can get a cheat sheet to reassemble them correctly. But chitin sits in its original shape during mineralization. Throughout the cavern, mixed in among the remains of the megafauna, we discovered lots of little fossilized isopods. As a child, you might have gone out hunting pillbugs, or roly-polies, or doodlebugs, and depending on your regional colloquialisms. They are the tiny terrestrial crustaceans you might find rolled up in a ball after you pick up a large rock or a piece of wood that has been sitting out for too long. As of now, they are still unidentified, but the university I work for does not boast the most impressive entomology department. The weird little unknown isopods we found looked like slightly longer versions of that bug. Some even found rolled up in tight spheres. The isopods were found in discernible clusters around the remains. The largest clusters were situated around where the digestive tracts would have been in each animal's, leading to the theory that the animals may have been eating the insects, although none of them were chewed. The other, smaller clusters were found by the base of the skull, the seat of the cerebellum. Brain structure for vertebrates is fairly similar. The different areas of the brain may have changed sizes as vertebrates have split off and evolved into multiple different species, but the location of these constructs is the same in a human as it is a mouse. The cerebellum, the muscle control center, is always housed in the back of the skull just above the brainstem. As the brain evolved, the brainstem came first and kept the autonomic control of things like breathing and blood flow, And the next most important control for life, purposeful movement, is built right above that. The back of the skull, now filled with dirt, is where we found the other clusters. After finding the clusters in the brain, I do not think it is likely that these animals came together on their own to form the most diverse pack in history. One of my grad students threw out the idea of the emerald cockroach wasp. The emerald cockroach wasp will sting a roach, specifically targeting the brain and performing a weird version of evolved lobotomy. The wasp then leads the lobotomized roach into the wasp's burrow, lays an egg in the still living roach, and seals it inside to sit quietly as the larvae gestate. She started suggesting, and to a receptive audience, that we had found an ancient nest of parasitic isopods who would burrow into the megafauna, crawl into the cerebellum to steer the captured animal into a secluded space, and keep them stable as the new generation grew up in their abdomen. The cavern we found happened to be one of those nice secluded places for a megafauna hunting parasite, and, unfortunately for the isopods, it just happened to get filled in one night during a heavy rainstorm. I believe that grad student went on to work that theory to earn her PhD, but I am not certain since she left our university after studying the insects. Again, the crux of a bad entomology department. I hope that the isopods are a relic of a bygone era, and that they died off when the Clovis people got to the Americas and killed off all their potential prey. I hope that, even if they could have survived without the megafauna, that they would not have survived the ice age that followed without their host. I hope we all were just misinterpreting the fossil record, and my ex-grad student's research is bunk. All of that would be easy to believe if the small town near this site had not an unusually high number of homeless people. People who have always mysteriously broken away from their familial ties and congregated together in abandoned buildings, under overpasses and other secluded areas. People who move wrong when you meet them on the streets. People who constantly slur their words and twitch their limbs as if they're not sure how to control themselves. I tell myself that they're just your average drunks, or victims of the opioid epidemic. But I fear what else they might be. And that's all. Thanks again to Robert Leakey, Your Pasta is Stale, over on Reddit, for letting me read part of his book to you. In Unnerving Tales from an Anthropologist, you can find everything from creepy caverns to Grecian ruins to even a cult in this collection of short horror stories. The ebook is short and sweet, just $1 on Amazon. I'll post a link in the description so you can check out the other stories that didn't make it into today's video. Don't forget to pass along a good word to the author and let him know which story is your favorite. After all, without the creative minds of horror writers, as well as true experiences of others, I wouldn't have nearly as much content for this channel. Don't forget to tune in next week for a special treat. I've got some Edgar Allan Poe waiting for you guys, so you gotta come back and check that out. In the meantime, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. If you got a story that you want me to read, then be sure to either email it to me, post it somewhere on here through a message, or one of the other media outlets that I have in the description below. In the meantime, thank you all so much for joining in this evening. This has been the Watcher Rezz'd, wishing you all a frightful night.